So we are going to be finishing up the Defending the Faith series that I've been doing. There's a couple of odds and ends that I wanted to throw in there, and they all deal with ice. So the name of this one is Ice, Ice. Jen was like, can you put on the song? Dun, 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 shh. So we're going to be talking about the Ice Age. That's the first ice thing that we're going to be talking about. I have 3 ice-related things. I don't know if anyone has ever seen the movie Ice Age, but that's the pre-squirrel Scrant.
Yeah.
So the question is deep time scientists say that there was many ice ages throughout the millions of years of evolution, and the New Age, young Earth creationists would say that there was one ice age. So we're going to discuss how an ice age can happen and what the conditions would be to see if there was multiple ice ages or if there's only one. So the first thing that you need for an ice age is that you need a cooling of the atmosphere. So you need cooler summers. So when the snow falls, it doesn't melt in the summers, so it starts to build up the ice sheet for the glaciers. So that's your first thing that you need. So what causes global cooling like that? And we've seen it, the scientists have seen it happen on numerous occasions. Volcanoes. When volcanoes explode, it shoots a bunch of ash up into the atmosphere, and the ash will actually block out the sun, and it will allow heat from the earth to radiate through the ash and out of the earth, but it won't allow the sun's heat to heat up the earth as much. So anytime a major volcano blows up, they can see the temperature in the area for 2 to 3 years drop like 2 to 3 degrees from what it normally is. And what causes volcanic activity? Does anyone know? Volcanoes. What causes the volcanoes to explode? All right, so we're going to get into plate subduction. So a long time ago, science actually didn't believe in the plate tectonics. They thought that was crazy sauce, and the scientists that were pushing for it, they thought didn't have any real knowledge in science, but now it's a very well accepted, known phenomenon of the Earth. So you have 2 plates, and when they come together, the ocean crust is thinner than the continental crust, so it'll actually go underneath the continental crust, and when that right there is what you see is the subduction zone, and that causes the lava to get pushed up onto the land and causes volcano. And that's how they say Mount Everest happened, and that's how we have the Mariana Trench. They're actually the same subduction zone. The trench is pushing down in, and then it's pushing Mount Everest up. The problem is the speed that the plates are moving at right now, and as much as it's pushing up the mountain range, at the speed that it's going at, it's eroding faster than it's pushing the mountain up. So Mount Everest is eventually going to be shorter than what it is right now. So that's a big problem, because uniformitarianism is what we see today is the key to the past, and if the plates are moving at a speed that's not allowing Mount Everest to grow but shrink, the plates would have had to have been moving faster at some point in time. So there has to be some kind of explanation as to how these plates were moving fast enough to push up the mountain range. And this gets into an idea that's called supersubduction. And creationist scientists took computer models of the plate tectonics, so he used a supercomputer and actually did all the math and figured that at one point in time there was a catastrophic event that caused the plates to move super fast, really quick, and that's what caused all of the mountain ranges that we see getting pushed up and all that, and it all worked out in his model. And the regular scientists at first didn't like that, because that's a catastrophe level event, and they don't like catastrophes. They want that uniform, everything happening the way that we see it nowadays. But he actually put it through the model. So the idea is, or the thought is that's actually part of what caused Noah's flood. As the plates are going down, the ocean crust actually completely renewed itself. It super fast pushed down into the earth, and then new lava where the rifts are in the middle of the ocean, where the plates are separating, that all recreated new ocean crust. And that crust would have been denser because it was hotter, or less dense because it was hotter. So it would have actually raised a little bit. So that would have pushed water up onto the land. The other thing Scripture talks about where it says the waters of the deep broke open, they actually now have found trapped water between the crust and the mantle in an area called the lithosphere, or linosphere, I think that's how you say it. There's, I think it's like 10 times the amount of water that we have on the earth is trapped in a mineral underneath the earth. So it shows that there definitely could have been enough water on the surface of the earth to cover it. So with super subduction, the plates went really fast underneath the mantle, new ocean floor was created, and as those plates are going super fast, it's going to cause a massive amount of volcanoes. So you would have had volcanoes all over the place. Anyone know the Ring of Fire? Do you know what the Ring of Fire is and not Johnny Cash? I said it, not Johnny Cash. I fell in. All right. Yeah, I won't kill you guys with my rendition of Johnny Cash. I'll let him sing it. What did you say? The Pacific Rim. So around the Pacific Ocean, there's all these volcanoes, and so all the plates were moving super fast. All that volcanic action would have been happening all at once, creating a whole bunch of dust in the air that would have lasted for a while, which would have cooled down the temperature of the Earth. But the other thing you need, am I there yet? Yep. Sorry, I was just seeing where I'm at. So the second thing you need is large snowfall. And the problem with that is when the temperature starts getting cooler, the air can't hold as much precipitation. So you have to have something that's causing precipitation while the air is also very cold. So what would do that is warm oceans. And if you have all this volcanic activity happening, if you have in the middle of the ocean where the two plates are separating, and that's bringing up lava to create the new ocean floor, that lava is going to start heating up the oceans. The lava pouring off of the land into the water is going to heat up the oceans, so you're going to have a much warmer ocean during all this volcanic activity, and that's going to cause more precipitation. So you have the ocean creating rain, the land being cooler, causing snowfall. So for years after years of this happening, it just started making the glaciers on the different parts of the continents to cause the ice age. So again, supersubduction is going to cause the volcanic flows, new ocean floor. So that whole new ocean floor is going to be much warmer because it just got created, came up out of the lava, and it's going to be hotter. And then the waters of the deep, when it said the waters of the deep broke open, you have, as you get deeper and deeper into the crust, it starts warming up. So we use, has anyone ever seen a geothermal heating system before, where they put water down into the ground? So when it's negative 10 degrees out, the water is 50 degrees. The deeper you go, the warmer it gets, and that's why you get hot springs. So is it Saratoga that has hot springs? Arkansas has. You got Yellowstone, Old Faithful, the geyser, all that is superheated water because it's coming from way below. So the waters of the deep, when that broke open and caused the flood, it's going to mix with the ocean water, and that's all going to warm up. So you're going to have this warm water that allows for the precipitation, and then you get the snowfall. So, and that's the problem with the deep time uniformitism. They don't have a mechanism that would cause the cool air and the warm oceans. So they can't, and any of their models, they haven't been able to explain how the ice age happened. They just know that an ice age did happen, and then they assume that multiple ice ages has happened throughout a cyclical long time period. So next thing we're going to look at is the mammoths. This is Liabu. That's her name. This is actually one of the most preserved specimens of a mammoth that they found. There's other ones that they found as well. So the deep time evolutionists are going to say that she was buried 30,000 years ago. No, that's a baby mammoth. Yeah, no, she's small. So, but they would have said that she lived 30,000 plus years ago, and then how they say the mammoths got into the permafrost is during the summers in the permafrost, the land melts, the top layer of the permafrost melts. So permafrost is frozen during the winter; it's frozen solid, and then during the winter or summer it warms up. The top layer turns into like a bog, like a swampy, and so they say that the waters warmed, or the land warmed up, melted the top layer of the permafrost. That mammoth would have fell into a mud pit, and then the permafrost would have froze her into that mud pit. The only problem is in that cycle, every year that mud pit would then again unfreeze, and then freeze, and then unfreeze. So for that, we can look at her again. The condition that she's saved in, there's no way that it would have been able to go through that cyclic every summer defrosting. She would have rotted away. So it's hard for them to explain how she would have got put into the permafrost and then stayed in that layer where it was frozen. So the other thing too is at 30,000 years old, we know in scientific labs when they take like cells and they try to preserve it for as long as they can to see how long cells can be preserved for in the best conditions, they only come up with like soft tissue could only survive 10,000 years. And that was what we were getting into when we were talking about the dinosaurs. There's no reason why dinosaur bones should have soft tissues in it, but they do. And every dinosaur bone they've cut open since they found it, all of them have soft tissue, blood cells, things like that. So this mammoth would not have been preserved this well for 30,000 years under normal conditions, or even under the best conditions. So a young Earth, all right, so they believe that she's 30,000 years old, and then that it was created from those bogs, then getting frozen back up again into permafrost. So in a young Earth model, a few hundred years after the flood, mammoths would have been stuck in a rapid flood. So as the glaciers were melting from the ice age that was created from the flood, they would have gotten buried from that flood, got buried in sediment, and then all of that would have turned into permafrost, and then they were just stuck in the permafrost. And then another issue that they have is mammoths were found with grass and buttercup flowers in their mouth. So one, they had to die quickly because they were still digesting, they were eating, they had food in their mouth, and even Liabu, whatever her name is, they found her with sediment in her trunk and in her airway. So she basically died of suffocation. They also know that she was super healthy when she passed, so she was a very healthy mammoth that died of suffocation from sediment being stuck in her. So the flood would have came through after the glaciers were melting. That glacier water would have broke and then flooded through the plain that they were in, and then buried them, and then the area turned into permafrost, which, I don't know if I put that slide up there. Nope, I didn't. So the other thing is, with what they found in their stomachs doesn't exist in the environment that their bodies are now in. So the permafrost and the cold Siberian tundra that they're in wouldn't have had the vegetation that they see that they were grazing on. So if you go back to the Ice Age model of the flood, those warm waters would have actually have caused Siberia, and there's one other place that they find a lot of mammoths, I think like in the Canadian region, that the warm ocean waters would have actually made those a very warm vegetation. So they would have had grazing grass and stuff like that. And then as the ice age was ending, the ocean was cooling down and no longer allowed for that warm air, and that's why we now have the permafrost that we have today there. So the flood model, again, explains how they would have been eating grass like they were, and then it turned into what's now a permafrost. Now, the last thing we're going to look at is the Glacier Girl. Has anyone ever heard of this story? So this is, trying to think, a P-38. There was a bombing mission that we were flying, and I think there was like 7 planes altogether, 5 P-38s and 2 bombers, and they ran into bad weather as they were coming back, had to land on Greenland. So they landed on the glacier cap of Greenland, and then the pilots were actually rescued shortly after, but they had to leave the planes on the glacier. So years later, these planes, if you could find a flyable plane like this, were selling for a lot of money. So the guys that left the planes were like, hey, let's go back to Greenland, find these planes, we can easily get them back, get them fixed up, they should still be in working condition, and we can sell them for a whole lot of money. So they went to go find them. I can't remember how many years after. I think it was like 20 or 30 years after they went to go find them. Couldn't find them anywhere. With the understanding of how ice layers work, after 40 years, there should only have been like 40 inches of snow on these planes, and they should have just been able to dig them out with shovels and be like, oh, there's the planes, let's dig them out with shovels. They couldn't find the planes anywhere. That's what the plane would have looked like in its glory. So 50 years later, they actually ended up finding the planes. They had to use sonar. They made special sonar equipment, ended up finding the planes. They were buried under 268 feet of ice. And with I remember when I was a kid, each inch of the ice, when they do the ice cores, back then they would consider a year. I think since they found this plane and looked at how deep it was in the ice, they've changed. I think now they believe that it's like a meter a year counts for the ice layers. So, yeah, so, but the math, even if you go for the 50 years, how deep this was, you would actually be looking at like 2 to 4 meters a year, because just the way the math worked out, that's how fast the ice would have had to have been created for this. So even with their modified versions, it still doesn't add up. The math doesn't quite add up to how fast this plane was buried. So they ended up getting equipment and then unburying it, and they actually, I think it was like in 2015, they actually got it to the point where it was able to fly, and they ended up selling it. But so they, from what I understand, they took it out in pieces and then reassembled it. So that's just goes to show you. So they again adjusted their model because that inch, I guess now it's a meter a year, they believe is the ice cores. But what's that? Yeah, that's what I'm saying, yep, instead of 50. So and they'll use ice cores to say that the Earth is millions of years old, because they'll drill down through, see all the layers, count up the layers, and say this is how many. But for that being 50 years and then buried 268 feet, shot that completely out. So they're kind of still trying to figure out how to. They adjusted the model a little bit, but not enough to really account for that. And with a 6,000-year-old Earth, it's easily explainable. So, and then the other thing with the ice too is some years that it won't produce any layers if it's not the right conditions. Again, you have to have that where the snow doesn't melt for it to. Some years the snow will melt away. So So in this, you see, one, the ice age, that we had the perfect conditions with the flood. The flood also allowed for the mammoths to be on vegetation that doesn't exist in that area anymore, and allow for the conditions for them to be quickly buried, frozen. The uniformitarianisms don't have a good method of explaining how all of the mammoths got buried. So, and then the ice cores don't really add up. So, has anybody got any questions or thoughts about all that?
So that water's as deep as Genesis 7:11 with Noah and the flood?
Yep. Let's go, we can turn there.
And that mammoth you said was found somewhere in Siberia?
That one was, yeah, in Siberia.
It had flesh and it had like a hairy skin to it or whatever?
Yeah, so I'll get it back to that picture. So it still had some fur. You can see like patches of the wool right there.
So it's not just an elephant.
It is a woolly mammoth, yep. And there's different ways that they can tell that it's a woolly mammoth apart from like a regular elephant. And I can't remember if this was the one that was found with the flower in its mouth, or there was another one that they found that was an adult. It wasn't as well preserved, but I think that was the one that they might have found with the flower in the mouth. And that one actually had a broken leg and a broken hip, so it shows that it was slowly buried to its leg, was fighting to get loose, broke its leg, and then as it was continuing to get buried, struggling, broke its rib, and then probably suffocated soon after. And that's why they are so well preserved. But they have there's just tons of these mammoths that are buried underneath this sand permafrost kind of ground that the old age evolutionists can't really explain the method of how or why they were. And then there's another big burial at a delta where like a big river flowing through that's like buried at this delta, which again would be as the glaciers were melting, caught them up in a big river or flood and buried them at the bottom of that delta. Mud. Yep. So, and that's, again, they would say that during the summer conditions on the permafrost that would have made a mud puddle, she would have fell into it. But then subsequently, every summer after that, that same area would have defrosted and she would have decayed and not been as well preserved as she is.
The top layer of the permafrost would melt.
Yep.
I guess I've always thought of permafrost is permanent defrosting, meaning it's deep down.
So the top layer during summers will sometimes defrost and then make these mud areas, but underneath that's still all frozen.
Do you have an idea of how deep she was found?
That I do not know. If someone wants to Google it real quick, I'm sure we could figure it out. Yeah, I don't think it really says. Anything that I read I didn't see a depth, or else I would have probably talked about it.
Yeah, the surface area of permafrost does thaw out, and you have to be creative how you, where and how you put houses in Alaska.
Yeah.
Because they don't get a foundation down into the permafrost.
Because I've heard of construction plans of putting freezing pipes by pillars in Alaska because the house will melt in unless you put pipes that will actually
Freeze.
Yeah, when they put the uprights where the Alaska pipeline is above the ground, I don't know if you ever saw pictures of it, those things in the crossing. There's these things on top, and that it's like antlers on a deer. It radiates the heat. Otherwise, the weight would push down, and it's got it so figured out. So they radiate enough heat so this doesn't melt the permafrost.
Yeah,
But yeah, the surface does.
does melt. A riverbank? Yeah, say. So, but I think it's very interesting. One, that there's a lot of these mammoths that are found frozen underneath the permafrost that all died very quickly. The one you could see was struggling, broke its leg, broke its rib as it was getting buried. The other thing that they believe could have happened was after the ice age was coming to an end, the area turned into basically what happened in America with the Dust Bowl, that there was these huge dust storms that they would have gotten buried by the sand, and then that layer all froze to become the permafrost. So
Did they do any radiocarbon dating on this?
I don't know if they did. I didn't read any on it. I can't imagine that they didn't, but old. A lot of times with those datings, they'll pick 2 or 3 different methods of dating something so they can get the age that they're looking for. So I don't remember any of the things that I read. They just said they assumed that she was 30,000 years old just based off of their timeline. So, but then you got to ask that brings up the question of, and what we were talking about, I think 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, is you have carbon-14 in diamonds that are buried in rock that should be 3 billion years old. So how do you find
Carbon-14 breaks down if you don't have some historical thing to,
account for?
match it with. So past a certain amount of time, it's
Yep.
very.
And the other thing with carbon-14 is, and it's an assumption that deep time scientists make, is that the carbon-14 in the atmosphere has always been the same amount of carbon-14. I don't know if I explained the whole process of carbon-14, but it's just in the atmosphere. The plants absorb it when they do photosynthesis. Then animals eat it. We eat the animals, they eat the plants, or we eat the plants. So throughout all of organic life, there's a certain amount of carbon-14 that's found in all of it. It kind of just like diffuses out throughout all of the living life. So when you die, you don't take any carbon-14 in anymore, and then it starts to decay. So they can guess by how much carbon-14 is left in a specimen how old it is, but they're making an assumption that when it died, the carbon-14 that was in the atmosphere is the same amount that's in the atmosphere today, which isn't, even with a deep time evolutionary mindset, they know that the atmosphere would have changed and has changed. So it's kind of hard to guess that, but
They do potassium iron.
yeah.
I don't know how that,
Yep, and then, but the thing with they have like, I think 4 or 5 different ways of doing dating based off of radioactive material, and they'll come up, like each one will come up with different dates. So, and then like I was saying, I think again a couple weeks ago, that they would take rock from lava flows that they knew when it happened, like Mount St. Helen. They took lava flow from Mount St. Helen, sent it off to labs to get tested, and it came back, like each lab came back with like its own date. They were all like completely different. So, and very old, when they knew that the rock had just been laid 10 years ago. So the dates should have came back 10 years old. It was coming back 30,000 years old, and it's like, how's that mathing? So it's just, they'll reject any number that doesn't fit the model and accept the ones that do. So they'll come up with it should be about this old. They'll test it 4 or 5 different ways. Whatever method comes up with the number that they want, that's the number that they use. So, any other thoughts, questions? Next week is going to be Josh. So this is wrapping up the defending of the faith. I don't know if did anyone listen to the teaching that I did on Tuesday? I got into a little bit of, we weren't able to do it on YouTube, so it's not saved, but it actually got into evolution on that too, through the book. I think I can't remember what chapter it is. Major Themes. What's the name of that book? Major Bible Themes. In the section, His Creation, talking about man, it talks a little bit about some of the issues that evolution has with DNA, and so we talked a little bit about that day too, but it's just different places. There's different areas that you can look at and look into if you are interested in it, that gives you a good, strong leg to stand on when you're talking to somebody that's an evolutionary or believes that there's the old age. And that's even creeping into Christianity, because you have the gap theory and you have the 1 day is 1,000 years to God, so you could fit millions of years into Genesis. But again, the problem with those is when you do the 1 day is 1,000 years to God, so we don't really know what day one, how long it was in Genesis. There's the issue of the light was made on, I want to say day 4, and plants were made on, or no, the plants were made on day 4, and then the light was made on day 5, or vice versa, whatever it was. So the plants were made, and then if there's these thousands of years between days, how did the plant survive without the light, and then the light was made? So that's a big issue with the 1 day being millions of years. And then the other thing too is Scripture teaches us that sin entered into the world because of Adam and Eve, and from sin, death. But if you go with that old age, thousands of years or millions of years in each day, you have this long line of death that led up to Adam and Eve, and it kind of, I feel like, it takes away from the message of the gospel, because Christ came because of death, died on a cross to take the punishment of death. But if death was already happening for millions of years before Adam and Eve showed up on the earth, then what was the purpose of Christ dying on the cross? So if sin didn't cause the death in the first place. So, any other thoughts, questions? So this is all I had for today. Again, I was wrapping everything up from what I was doing. So you guys, if you want, we can end in prayer if you guys don't have any other thing, and we'll be free until chapel. So any other questions or, and then.
268 feet to get to that plane,
Yeah, through the ice.
and it was still profitable?
It was, I don't know at that point if it was still profitable. No, I think at that point they were committed to the, yeah. So, yeah, and to me, if I would have went out on the ice and didn't find the plane, I probably would have just been like, ah, I guess whatever, someone came and stole it, or I don't think I'd be buying expensive sonar equipment to find but they did. And actually, I guess it had, because glacier moves kind of like water. It flows in a river just very slowly. So it had actually moved from the position that they landed in. It was like way off from where it had landed, because the glaciers do move. So, oh, and that was the other thing I forgot. With the Ice Age, when they can tell that the Siberian area and the Alaskan area didn't have glacier ice on it during the Ice Age, because when the glaciers are created and they start moving forward and they start sliding, they leave marks on the land. There's like parts where, as it gets to its final destination, right in front of it, there's a big pileup of the rocks that it, yep, moraine, and they don't find those in the Siberian and Alaskan area, so it shows that those areas didn't have glaciers on them during the Ice Age. So, which would be expected if the oceans were super warmed. So, and that's how we get a lot of our landscape that we have here, is because the way the ice moves across the land, it cuts into that's how we got the Finger Lakes. But, all right, let's end in prayer. God, just thank you for this time, this series that we got to learn how to defend our faith a little more, and hopefully God will use it and test us in it throughout the weeks that we run into people. Maybe, you know, someone will just randomly say, well, I believe, you know, we came from apes, and we can defend our faith on that. So we just lift this up in your name. Pray for the time that we have in the chapel, and the fellowship we'll have in wrap, and we lift this up. Amen.